The courtroom became silent the moment Brandon Hale smiled, not because the case was confusing, not because the evidence was weak, but because everyone in that room had just watched a 32-year-old man shove a 71-year-old Vietnam veteran to the ground on Veterans Day. And Brandon still looked like he expected to walk out untouched. He sat there in an expensive charcoal suit, his hands folded like this was a business meeting, not a criminal hearing. His attorney whispered beside him. The victim sat only a few feet away with a brace on his wrist and a Purple Heart pinned to his lapel. And then Brandon said the words that changed everything. "My father is the chief of police. I think this whole thing is embarrassing." The entire courtroom froze, because in the back row, wearing plain clothes and no badge, sat Brandon's father, Chief William Hale, a man who had served that city for 35 years. Brandon thought his father's name would protect him. He thought power would save him. But what his father did next left the whole courtroom speechless, because sometimes real love does not rescue someone from consequences. Sometimes real love stands up in court and says, "Hold him accountable." The file on my desk already felt heavy before the hearing even began. State versus Brandon Hale. Assault and battery on an elderly person. The victim was Arthur Bennett, 71 years old, a Vietnam veteran, retired history teacher, grandfather, and volunteer at the local Veterans Support Center. Before I tell you what Brandon did, you need to understand who Arthur was. Arthur Bennett enlisted in the United States Army at 18. He served with the 101st Airborne Division and completed 2 tours in Vietnam. He came home with a Purple Heart, a permanent limp, and memories he rarely discussed unless another veteran needed someone who understood. After the war, Arthur did not ask for sympathy. He taught high school history for 30 years. He coached baseball on weekends. He helped younger veterans fill out forms, find medical appointments, and survive the quiet loneliness that follows some people home from war. Every morning at 8:15, Arthur walked his old golden retriever through Riverside Park. The dog's name was Scout. That walk was Arthur's peace, his routine. His small piece of normal life after losing his wife 2 years earlier. On November 11th, Veterans Day, Brandon Hale drove his black Mercedes through the park road at more than 50 miles per hour. The speed limit was 15. Scout pulled slightly toward the curb, and Arthur raised one hand, not angrily, not aggressively. Just a simple gesture every driver understands. Slow down, that was all. Slow down. Brandon did not slow down. He stopped, put the car in park, opened the door, stepped out, then he walked straight toward Arthur Bennett and shoved the 71-year-old man so hard that Arthur hit the pavement and could not stand up by himself. Arthur suffered a fractured wrist, 2 bruised ribs, and a serious concussion. He spent 3 nights in the hospital. When paramedics arrived, he was still trying to sit upright, because men like Arthur often carry pride even when their body is failing them. 3 witnesses called 911. All 3 told the same story. Brandon stood over Arthur while he was on the ground and said, "Next time, old man, keep your hands to yourself. My father runs this city. You don't know who you're dealing with." Then Brandon got back into his Mercedes and drove away. By the time he entered my courtroom, I knew the facts were bad, but a courtroom does not only reveal facts, it reveals character, and Brandon revealed his immediately. He walked in wearing polished shoes, an expensive suit, and a watch that looked like it cost more than some people made in a month. His attorney, Martin Cole, followed with a thick leather folder full of motions, documents, and prepared arguments. That is what attorneys do when the truth is ugly. They try to bury it under paper. Brandon did not look nervous. He looked inconvenienced. He glanced around the courtroom like he was deciding whether the room deserved his attention. He never looked at Arthur Bennett. Not once. Arthur sat in the front row in dress clothes. His wrist was still in a brace. His Purple Heart was pinned neatly to his jacket. He sat straight, quiet, and composed. Brandon, the man who had put him on the ground on Veterans Day, could not even look at him. That told me almost everything. I called the case. Brandon stood beside his attorney. "How do you plead?" I asked. Martin Cole answered quickly. "Not guilty, Your Honor. We believe the evidence is circumstantial and the witnesses are inconsistent." I looked directly at Brandon. "Mr. Hale, I asked you, do you have a voice?" Brandon's smirk stayed in place. "Not guilty." "Good," I said. "Then let's talk about November 11th. Officer Rachel Morgan stepped forward with the evidence. She presented the 911 calls, the witness statements, and Arthur's hospital report. Then she presented the security footage. The room changed immediately. The footage came from a recreation center near the park. It was clear, full color, and time-stamped. Everyone watched the black Mercedes appear on screen, moving far too fast for that narrow road. Arthur stepped near the curb and calmly raised his hand, signaling the driver to slow down. Then the Mercedes stopped. Brandon stepped out. He walked toward Arthur with his shoulders tight and his jaw set. Then came the shove. A 32-year-old man pushing a 71-year-old veteran with a bad leg straight onto the pavement. The courtroom watched Arthur fall, watched Brandon stand over him, watched Brandon gesture, watched him return to his car, watched him leave. When the video ended, no one spoke. It was not ordinary silence. It was the silence that comes when everyone has seen something too clear to excuse. I turned to Brandon. "Still not guilty, Mr. Hale." He shrugged, actually shrugged. He stepped into the road. I reacted. A whisper moved through the gallery. Arthur Bennett remained perfectly still. I leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, I have been on this bench a long time. I have heard defendants lie with desperation, creativity, and sometimes impressive confidence. But what I just watched was not a reaction. It was a decision." Brandon's eyes narrowed. "You put your car in park," I said. "You opened the door. You walked toward a 71-year-old man. You shoved him. Then you left. Those are choices. So I will ask again. Do you want to reconsider your description of what happened?" His attorney placed a hand on his arm. Brandon pulled away. Then he made the mistake that exposed the real problem. "Your Honor," he said, calm and smug. "My father has served this city for 35 years. He's the chief of police. I think it's fair to say I understand law enforcement. That old man was in the road. I protected myself and moved on. The fact that I'm even here is embarrassing." The gallery did not gasp. It went quieter than that, a sharper silence. I removed my glasses. "Embarrassing," I repeated. "Mr. Hale, do you know who Arthur Bennett is?" For the first time, Brandon glanced at Arthur. Quick, dismissive. "No." I stood from the bench. The courtroom shifted. "Mr. Bennett," I said, "would you please stand?" Arthur rose slowly, careful with his injured wrist and the leg that had carried him through war and decades of work. "Tell this court who you are." Arthur cleared his throat. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "My name is Arthur Bennett. I served in the United States Army, 100th Airborne Division from 1971 to 1973. 2 tours in Vietnam, Purple Heart recipient. After I came home, I taught history at Jefferson High School for 30 years. I have 4 grandchildren. I walk my dog through that park every morning because it's the only quiet hour I've had since I've passed." He paused. Then he looked at Brandon. "On Veterans Day, I asked a man to slow down because I didn't want my dog to get hit. He put me on the ground." No one moved. I turned back to Brandon. "You shoved a decorated combat veteran, a man who risked his life for this country, a man who spent 30 years teaching children, a man walking his dog on Veterans Day, and you called that a reaction." Brandon's smirk was gone. "You are 32 years old." I said, "You should be ashamed of yourself." His attorney whispered urgently, but Brandon ignored him. Instead, he looked at me and said, "My father will be speaking with the district attorney's office about this case. I think you should be aware of that." There it was. The truth at the center of the case. Not just the shove, not just the speeding, not even the insult. The belief. The belief that his father's badge was a shield. I looked at him carefully. "Mr. Hale, are you telling this court that your father's position will influence how I conduct this hearing?" Brandon held my gaze. "I'm saying he knows people." I looked toward the gallery. "Chief Hale, would you please come forward?" Every head in the courtroom turned. In the last row, a man stood, late 50s, gray at the temples, plain shirt, no uniform, no badge. No attempt to wear the authority his son had been waving around like a weapon. Chief William Hale walked down the aisle slowly. He had heard everything. He had watched the footage. He had listened to his son dismiss an injured veteran and threaten the court with his father's name. And the look on his face was not anger. It was grief. Brandon turned around. His expression changed instantly. Confusion, relief, then fear. "Because he saw his father's face, Dad," Brandon said. "What are you?" Chief Hale raised one hand. Brandon stopped talking. I nodded toward the chief. "Chief Hale, Your son has told this court that your position and relationships may affect this case. I want to give you the chance to respond." Chief Hale stood straight. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but every person in the room could hear what it cost him.